10 years ago, if someone asked where to travel in Southeast Asia, the answer was almost automatic. Thailand dominated travel bucket lists, guidebooks, travel blogs, and social media feeds, becoming the destination that many travelers imagined before they ever booked their first flight to the region. Today, something interesting is happening. Thailand remains one of the world's most popular travel destinations, but an increasing number of travelers are choosing Vietnam first, and the shift has become noticeable enough that it is changing conversations throughout the travel community. At first, that trend can seem surprising. Thailand still offers beautiful beaches, incredible food, world-famous islands, vibrant cities, and tourism infrastructure that has been refined over decades of international travel. Yet more travelers are arriving home from Southeast Asia talking about Vietnam. They are sharing stories about places they discovered, experiences they did not expect, and a country that somehow managed to exceed expectations in ways they had not anticipated before the trip began. Many of these travelers did not initially plan for Vietnam to become the highlight of their journey. Some viewed it as a secondary stop, while others considered it an alternative destination that happened to fit their schedule or budget. What often changes their perspective is the realization that Vietnam feels fundamentally different from what they expected. Instead of feeling like a backup option, it frequently becomes the place they remember most long after the journey is over. The story begins with expectations. For years, Thailand built a reputation as the gateway to Southeast Asia, offering a combination of beaches, culture, nightlife, food, and convenience that appealed to almost every type of traveler. That reputation was well deserved. Millions of people fell in love with Thailand because it delivered exactly what it promised, creating memories that encouraged friends, family members, and future travelers to follow in their footsteps. As a result, Thailand became familiar even to people who had never visited. Many travelers could already picture Bangkok's skyline, tropical islands, floating markets, and famous beaches long before they ever arrived. Vietnam, meanwhile, developed differently. Although tourism continued growing steadily, the country remained somewhat less familiar to many international travelers, creating an advantage that only became obvious later. When people finally arrived in Vietnam, they often experienced something travel has become increasingly difficult to find. They experienced surprise. The landscapes looked different than expected. The cities felt different than expected. The atmosphere felt different than expected. Instead of simply matching preconceived images, Vietnam often challenged them. That feeling of discovery has become one of the country's biggest advantages. In an era where social media exposes almost every destination on Earth before people arrive, Vietnam still manages to create moments that feel genuinely unexpected. Many travelers eventually realize that the biggest reason people are choosing Vietnam over Thailand is not necessarily because it is cheaper. The real attraction is that Vietnam often feels like a destination that still has surprises waiting around the next corner. That feeling changes the entire travel experience. Instead of arriving with a mental checklist of attractions already seen thousands of times online, visitors frequently feel as though they are uncovering experiences for themselves. The country's cities contribute heavily to that impression. Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City are busy, energetic, and constantly evolving, yet they maintain identities that feel distinctly their own rather than interchangeable with other global destinations. Walking through these cities often feels like moving through multiple eras simultaneously. Historic architecture, modern development, local markets, family-run businesses, and rapidly growing commercial districts exist side by side in ways that create a unique sense of character. Many visitors are surprised by how quickly they become attached to these urban environments. What initially appears chaotic often begins revealing patterns, routines, and rhythms that make daily life feel fascinating rather than overwhelming. Food plays an equally important role in Vietnam's growing popularity. Travelers frequently arrive already familiar with dishes such as pho, banh mi, and fresh spring rolls, only to discover that Vietnamese cuisine extends far beyond the handful of meals that achieved international recognition. Every region introduces different flavors, ingredients, cooking styles, and traditions. Exploring Vietnam often becomes a culinary journey where each destination provides opportunities to experience something completely different from the place visited before. Street food culture also remains one of the country's defining strengths. Travelers regularly describe meals enjoyed on simple plastic stools, busy sidewalks, local markets, and neighborhood restaurants as some of the most memorable experiences of their entire trip. The appeal extends beyond the food itself. Dining often becomes an opportunity to observe daily life unfolding around them, creating moments that feel authentic rather than carefully packaged for visitors. The scenery adds another layer to Vietnam's growing reputation. One of the country's greatest strengths is the sheer variety it offers within a relatively accessible travel route. Visitors can move from vibrant cities to mountain landscapes, from coastal destinations to historic towns, and from river systems to dramatic limestone formations without feeling as though they are repeating the same experience. Places such as Ha Long Bay, Sapa, Ninh Binh, Da Nang, Hoi An, and the Mekong Delta all offer dramatically different environments while remaining connected by a distinct national identity that travelers often find difficult to describe but easy to recognize. Around this point in many journeys, something interesting begins to happen. Travelers who initially arrived comparing Vietnam to Thailand often stop making comparisons altogether because Vietnam starts standing comfortably on its own merits. This becomes one of the most important turning points in how people experience the country. Instead of constantly measuring what Vietnam does better or worse than Thailand, they begin appreciating Vietnam for what it uniquely offers. That shift frequently surprises visitors because many arrived expecting Vietnam to be an alternative destination. They leave realizing it never needed to be compared to anything else in the first place. Cost remains part of the conversation, of course. Vietnam continues to offer exceptional value across accommodation, transportation, food, and activities, allowing many travelers to extend their trips far beyond what they originally expected. What makes this especially appealing is that the value often enhances the travel experience rather than simply reducing expenses. Travelers gain more freedom to explore, stay longer, try new experiences, and travel at a slower pace without feeling constant pressure on their budgets. This flexibility often leads to deeper experiences. Instead of rushing between attractions, visitors can spend additional days in places they enjoy, creating opportunities for spontaneous discoveries that become some of the most memorable parts of the journey. The country's transportation network has improved significantly as well. Domestic flights, trains, buses, and modern infrastructure make it increasingly easy for travelers to move between regions and experience multiple sides of Vietnam during a single trip. At the same time, Vietnam still retains an atmosphere that feels less polished and more spontaneous than some heavily visited tourism destinations. For many travelers, this balance between accessibility and authenticity is particularly appealing. Interactions with local people frequently become another highlight. Visitors often mention the friendliness, curiosity, and hospitality they encounter throughout the country, especially once they move beyond the most heavily visited tourist areas. These interactions create stories that remain memorable long after specific attractions begin fading from memory. Conversations, shared meals, recommendations from locals, and unexpected encounters often become the moments travelers talk about most when they return home. Of course, Vietnam is not perfect. Traffic can feel intimidating, especially for first-time visitors. Language barriers occasionally create challenges, and some destinations are becoming increasingly popular as tourism continues expanding. Thailand also continues offering advantages that make it one of the world's great travel destinations. Its tourism infrastructure remains exceptional, and many travelers still consider it one of the easiest places on earth for first-time international travel. This is why the conversation should not be framed as Thailand losing relevance. Thailand remains extraordinary and continues attracting millions of visitors every year for very good reasons. The more interesting story is why Vietnam's appeal continues growing so quickly. Travelers are increasingly looking for destinations that combine value, cultural depth, memorable food, diverse landscapes, and opportunities for genuine discovery within a single journey. Vietnam consistently delivers that combination. The country offers enough familiarity to feel accessible while retaining enough unpredictability to feel exciting, creating a balance that many travelers find increasingly difficult to resist. As more visitors return home sharing stories about mountain villages, historic towns, bustling cities, coastal escapes, and unforgettable meals, curiosity continues spreading among people planning future trips. That growing curiosity fuels further growth. More travelers arrive, more stories are shared, and more people begin considering Vietnam as their first choice rather than their second. For many travelers in 2026, Vietnam is no longer viewed as an alternative to Thailand. It has become a destination capable of standing entirely on its own, attracting visitors not because it competes with another country but because it offers an experience people genuinely want. And perhaps the most fascinating question moving forward is whether Vietnam can continue maintaining that feeling of discovery as its popularity grows. Because the very quality attracting so many travelers today is the same quality destinations often struggle to preserve once the rest of the world fully catches on.